tide may be changing for Bitcoin miners in Texas. According to our next guest, the state's grid operator is slowing the issuance of new permits for miners to connect to the grid. Joining us now to discuss is the Director of Bitcoin Mining Analytics at the Texas Blockchain Council, Steve Kinard. Hi, Steve. So the Texas Blockchain Council is an industry association. What are you hearing from miners?
Hey, good afternoon, Christine. Thanks for having me on. I think the feedback that we have from our industry partners is really very positive. I was just in Austin yesterday, in fact, meeting with regulators here in Texas, and we continue to welcome miners to the state. And frankly, the near-term slowdown and permitting has really just been a function of the tremendous demand and interest in investing in Texas. I'm very encouraged by the progress we're making, and I know that we will be welcoming more and more miners to Texas and making sure that they're a valuable part of strengthening the grid here. So there really is no new era, in my opinion. It's just that there's been such a fast pace of growth in terms of the investment and the new companies coming here that we had to evolve as a state, as well as the Texas Blockchain Council as an industry association. We've grown a lot ourselves. And we continue to do that to meet the demand. So we're ramping up our efforts to welcome more miners here and look forward to a bright year ahead.
Okay, so you're not seeing any slowdown to that growth at all. It's just a bit of a bottleneck in getting the permits. Is that what's going on?
I think that's a very accurate way to describe it. It's a bottleneck from the simple fact that the demand was just so much, particularly after the China ban on mining last year. You know, some of these regulators, they've hired numerous new people that focus almost entirely just on Bitcoin miners. So they just didn't have the personnel even to process these requests or properly perform the studies needed to ensure that the grid is stable and meeting the demands. So it's really never been something where we've deliberately been slowing or pushing back against mining. It's just that nowhere really has seen this amount of growth so fast from so many different companies. Overall, I view it as a good thing, though I'm sure all of us wish that it had gone along faster. But we are making a lot of progress now, and we are building towards the Texas Blockchain Summit in Austin, Texas in November, where we'll be featuring all of the large miners here in Texas at our event there in November in Austin. And I'm sure it's going to be very positive there in terms of welcoming these new miners, getting their projects not just permitted, but ramped up and hashing. Right. And as you already mentioned, we see some of that already with the difficulty adjustment as more hash rate continues to come on the network. And I think Texas is a big part of that.
Well, with the difficulty adjustment and, you know, the price of Bitcoin slumping over the summer, reducing profits and forcing some to sell their mined tokens to cover operating costs. So what will happen to miners in this crunch?
Yeah, it certainly is kind of a huge change that we've seen in the economic realities over just the past couple of months. You know, you just showed a graphic there with some of our largest miners that are members of the Texas Blockchain Council and very active in the state. And particularly the larger miners, I think over the medium and long term stand to benefit because they've made long-term plans. On Monday, in fact, I was in Rockdale, Texas, visiting the Riot blockchain facility there with U.S. Senator Cruz. And I can tell you from firsthand experience, they continue to build to build out their workforce there and execute on their plans here in Texas. And so I think the volatility often presents an advantageous time for new investments and growth. And so we see a lot of our members are not slowing down, but are continuing to execute on investment plans that they made months and sometimes even longer ago. And there will be some consolidation, certainly in the coming months within the industry due to the hash price and the difficulty adjustment moving up. But in the medium to long term, there's still a lot of growth potential in Texas, and we're very positive in our outlook.
All right, and the Texas agency that regulates the grid, ERCOT, estimates that 33 gigawatts worth of Bitcoin mining projects planned are waiting for permits. Do you see them all eventually passing through? Is that, part of the growth plan?
It's a great question, Christine. We were actually just in Austin at ERCOT yesterday having a discussion about this very number. And the issue is there's a critical difference here in terms of interconnection requests, which is that number you're referring to, the 32 or 33 gigawatt, and the more important projects that have financial security behind them. So think of those interconnection requests as just really people that are interested and taking a first step, almost as if you might, book an appointment to go see a house that's for sale. Doesn't mean you're going to buy the house. So it's a big difference between that and projects that have financial security. We are working to provide some more transparency around these projects that are actually closer to a stage of execution. But in any event, over the next 2 years, we don't expect much more than 3 gigawatts of projects that will move into that execution phase. So the interconnection request number is, in a ballpark way, is like a 10x overstatement of the potential amount of power that could come on. In addition to that, a lot of estimates are that the entirety of the Bitcoin network is about 15 gigawatts, or at the high end 20. So it really is just not possible. I think it is a strong indication of just how tremendous the interest and demand is for people that want to come to Texas and invest in Texas. But we really stress that the 32 gigawatt number, in terms of actually planning for reliability of the grid and sizing up the amount of activity, it's really not a relevant number, at least in the near term. And we're working to bring some better data and transparency to the public, because understandably a lot of people hear that and it drives some headlines about more power than all of New York to be consumed. And it's just
I was just going to say, because,
happen.
Texas has had trouble over the summer keeping up with the electricity demands of the state. And so I wonder if, with this demand, whether or not it has the infrastructure to withstand all that interest.
Yeah, we do. Over the summer, there were a number of conservation notices that were sent out, but I would stress that there were no grid issues in terms of brownouts or blackouts or disruptions. So I think that's important to note. And as new load continues to come onto the grid, whether that be Bitcoin mining or just all of the people that continue to move to Texas, we're also increasing generation. So there's a tremendous pipeline, particularly of solar and wind resources, that are being built out in Texas. And so as more generation comes on, more load can come on as well. And then the benefit of the Bitcoin miners is that they are flexible. So in times of high demand, when perhaps there's not enough supply to meet it, miners have shown this summer over 1,000 megawatts was powered down to provide support to the grid. So over the medium and long term, there's really no concern about stability on the grid, certainly as it pertains to Bitcoin miners. And in fact, in the coming months, and as we lead up to the Texas Blockchain Summit in Austin in November, we are going to be putting forth a bigger effort to partner and incentivize and show how Bitcoin mining can support more generation coming to Texas. And that's really to help people understand that Bitcoin mining isn't an industry that just comes and consumes power that maybe otherwise would have been used by a house or by a school or something like that. It's really the opposite. It's an industry that brings this flexible demand that's going to help us incentivize accelerating and building more generation. And that's more power for everyone, including Bitcoin miners.
Excellent.
And that was a big part of our message on Monday
Steve.
in Rockdale with Senator Cruz and with Riot and what they're doing here in the state.